Hi everyone, my name is Ronnie Bandini. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm a musician and maker. I'm deeply sorry I don't speak Italian at this point. I have plans to learn in the future, so this talk will be in English. We use machines all the time, a camera, a car, a computer. We tend to think about machines when there is a clear purpose involved. For example, we need to take pictures, we need to move long distances, we need to make calculations, clear task. But what about those machines mentioned in books and literature without a clear purpose, or with subtle tasks, or with fictional foundations? Do they still deserve to be made? And this book is a book from Choose Your Own Adventure series. They were very popular in the 80s, and they include a main difference among other books. The difference is that at the end of every chapter, make a decision. You have to choose between different options. Of course, these books were intended for young adults and children. So let's view an example. You live in Argentina and there's a guy coming at you with a knife to rob you. So if you want to run for your life, you have to go to page number 2. If you feel lucky, you go to page number 3. So let's say we are feeling lucky, bad luck, you got stabbed, and the story ends there. That's the main idea. But the interesting thing here is that almost 20 years before Choose Your Own Adventure books, there was an acclaimed novel by a great writer named Julio Cortázar from Argentina. And this novel, in English and in Spanish is Rayuela, in English is hopscotch, also provide different paths to readers. It is possible to read hopscotch from chapter 1 to chapter 56 in a sequential order. You can also read hopscotch inserting almost 100 chapters in a specific order provided by Julio Cortázar. And there's a third way to this novel, which is many ways. You can create your own path through the entire novel. So the complexity of this book was such that a machine was proposed to read the novel. In fact, these plans were published by Julio Cortázar in another book named La Vuelta al Día en 80 Mundos. We can see here a dubious taste furniture there in the back with drawers. We can see also some kind of bed and a fridge. I can imagine that the idea was to print all the chapters in sheets and put the sheets in the drawers. So you lay there in the bed, you check one drawer, read the chapter, you put inside, you check another one. I think that was the idea. Not so sure about the fridge role in this entire machine operation, but anyway. The thing is that this machine was never made in 50 years or so. And I started to wonder why nobody made the machine in that time. The answer was straightforward, maybe because you need some skills, you need effort, maybe because there was not enough demand and the task to solve was so subtle. But there is also a good part in all of this when you have a complicated task that requires specific skills and no demand at all. The thing is that if you don't succeed, well, it was a complicated start to start a complicated task. And also, if you don't succeed, nobody will make a claim because nobody requested the machine. Using those ideas, I decided to give it a try. So at that point, I did not have 3D model skills, and I asked for the project enclosure using a 3D printer with a resemblance of a hopscotch, with the shape of a hopscotch. I've got an Arduino Nano, the parts an OLED screen, push button, switch selector, shampoo cables. And using some tutorials I found online, I started to connect all the pieces together. The part I felt most comfortable with was the coding part, because I'm a computer programmer. So I started to code the application. And in a few weeks, I had the machine ready. The machine name is Racconto, and it has 3 operation modes. When you put the selector in the S mode, S for sequential, the screen shows you the chapters from 1 to 56, and it considers 56 chapters as the 100% of the novel to show the progress. If you switch to T mode, T is from Spanish word tablero, because in the original novel, tablero de dirección was the title for this path that Julio Cortázar designed among all the chapters. So in this case, the entire path is recorded in Arduino's memory, and it shows you, well, you are now in chapter, let's say chapter 2, you have to go to chapter 46, and that's the idea. And the last mode, A for azar, in Spanish, azar means random. In this case, the machine will create a custom path every time. There was a lot of people back in the day that read, and today also, Rayuela in the S mode and in the T mode, but a few people actually try to read this novel in the A mode, because you need some way to obtain the chapters at random basis. You need to keep record of the chapters that were read already. So having the machine, at first, I thought about Racconto as a small piece of electronic art, but soon enough, the machine started some kind of dialogue between Cortázar's fans, and it was revealing, or maybe confirming, that the genius that Cortázar was in regards to structure and language. So this machine was, in fact, the starting point for all the literature machines that comes later. Roald Dahl, maybe you know Roald Dahl, one of the greatest 20th century children writers. Here we have the covers for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But in fact, Roald Dahl also wrote for adults. In 1949, he wrote a great short story for the New Yorker magazine. The name of this short story is The Sound Machine. And in this story, an inventor named Klausner discovers by accident that a machine is able to hear plants when they scream in specific spectrum frequencies. Some years later, a guy named Cliff Baxter, which he was a CIA interrogation specialist, allegedly inspired a Roald Dahl short story, applied a polygraph. We remember that a polygraph is a machine to understand if you're telling the truth. He applied the polygraph to plants, and he wrote this book, Primary Perception, stating that that plants have emotions, and it's possible to measure those emotions through the polygraph. A lot of years passed since then. We today know that there is no scientific base for Roald Dahl short story and for Cliff Baxter research. But I started to think, what can we still measure in a plant, and what could be linked to a human response or emotion? And the answer was, of course, hydration, soil moisture. I started to check, and it was an off-the-shelf, ready-to-use sensor to measure soil moisture. So I bought one of those as the input for this machine, and I use a vintage biometer as one of the outputs. And I also got a small piece from DF Robot, which is an electronic parts provider and sponsor of many of my machines, named DF Player Mini, which is an MP3 player. I got some recordings of laughs, chills, and also screams, and I put them inside the micro SD card, and the micro SD card inside the DF Player Mini. Then I coded the software. Basically, it was a really simple program, depending on the measures of the soil moisture sensor. At random, I choose between recordings from the jiggle and laughs, or from the screen part if the soil is really dry. When I finished the machine, I wanted to create a video to post online. So I got some plants that I had in my house, some of them very dry, some of them in good conditions. And it was a surprise that even when I did the machine, I was checking with the dry plants and hearing a scream coming between quotes, right, from that plant, provided a strange experience and great consciousness about subtle life forms. So there are always non-calculated effects when you are making these machines, even when the foundations comes from fiction and there is no scientific base. I wanted to talk also a little bit about the mechanical torque. In 1770s, there was an inventor named Kempelen who made a chess playing machine, and it was a great success. And in fact, the machine wasn't a machine, it was just a clever furniture with a small and good chess player here inside. It was a hoax. But nevertheless, Charles Babbage played against the machine and he lost. And it was a great influence. And when Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace made the analytic engine, one of the influences for that, which is the father of modern computer, was this experience with the mechanical turk. So again, sometimes you have fictional foundations or a machine that is not working exactly as you advertise, but those machines still provides a lot of influence in other projects that comes later. Alejandra Pizarnik was a talented Argentine poet. She died in 1972, and there are almost no recordings of her voice. But a small poem reading by Arturo Carrera, written with a nictograph, escrito con un nictógrafo. So I started to check what is a nictograph, and it turned out that the nictograph was a system developed by Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice's Adventures in the Wonderland. Lewis Carroll, as many other writers like Roberto Art, was also an inventor, and he liked to take notes in the dark without bothering other people in the room. So he designed this system to take notes in the dark. How does it work, the nictography? So he made a custom alphabet, and he's using a grid of cells to guide the writing in the dark. You don't have to be looking at the page because you're using the grid and the alphabet and the grid do some kind of trick where you don't have to be looking at. Of course, today we have smartphones, we have text-to-speech. It doesn't much sense, but even in that case, it's a beautiful alphabet and a beautiful story. So I wanted to make a machine related to this invention from Lewis Carroll. The first step was to design every letter of this alphabet in BMP format. Then I converted every letter to byte array. Byte array is a format for storing images inside an Arduino memory. I've got, for this case, an Arduino Mega because I needed more memory. The Arduino Uno, other boards that I had didn't have. I've got also an LCD screen. I've got a rotary encoder, some LEDs. Let's see what else. Chamfer cables and a thermal printer. And how this machine works? You have to turn the wheel, and you form any phrase letter by letter. And when you finish, you press the yellow rotary encoder, and the word is printed using a thermal banner. So what is the purpose in this case? I'm not so sure, even now, maybe it's a trick to a beautiful alphabet, maybe a bridge between an English author and two Argentine poets. Maybe it's an excuse to tell an interesting story and keep some wheel going. Okay, now new impressions of Africa. Just one moment. New Impressions of Africa was a huge poem written by Raymond Roussel, a French author. It's a complex poem with asides up to 5 levels deep. We can see there on the screen at the left, the structure. So this complexity was the starting point for a machine that was proposed to read the poem. There we have the plans from Esteban Facio, which is some kind of mechanical device similar to a Rolex. And so too bad, someone already made a machine for this book. But the thing is that the same author had a novel named Impressions of Africa. The other one was a poem, this one was a novel, and the subject of this novel was a trip from Marseille to Buenos Aires. I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina, so the temptation to make a machine for this specific book was really high. So I started to work in this project. First of all, I used Rolodex. This is some kind of device to store business card. It wasn't easy to Buenos Aires. It is very common in the States, but not here. But I got one. Then I used Adobe InDesign to design the cards. Every card has a specific format, and I use it the same design as the original machine, as we can see here, by Esteban Facio. So sometimes the machines have links to other projects, and it's interesting to maintain those relationships. So I made a split in the novel to put different fragments in these cards. I designed 2 very strong arms using 3D printing. I've got a button on Arduino, a powerful servo motor to rotate all the structure with the cards. And I designed the software in one specific way. Whenever you touch the button there, the machine will turn the wheel. And for how long it will turn the wheel? For numbers related to the biography of Raymond Roussel. For example, Roussel died in, let me check, 1933. So 1933 milliseconds are used to move the wheel before you obtain the new card to read. And again, what's the purpose of the machine? Of course, you can read the original book and that's it. But something that was not calculated happens when you have the machine there and you start to read in cards, and there are kinetics and sounds involved. And the next card you have to read is not the next card that comes in the book, but a card that is almost random, but also not random because we are using numbers from Raymond Roussel biography. So this was the machine Alire Roussel. Now I'm going to talk about an Uruguayan author named Mario Lebreiro. The machine to think of Gladys was on and poured softly as usual. This short story was published in 1970. And as I said, Mario Lebreiro was an Uruguayan author. And this is all he says in this short story about the machine. And this is all I needed to start the machine. Sometimes it's better to have less information than a lot of information. The same applies when you want to make a movie. If you have a short story, it's better than having a novel. And in this case, works that way. I know that the machine was on, so it could be turned on and off and poured softly. So I bought an old communications device, the enclosure, and I decided to use this enclosure as a restriction for this project. Regarding the sound, I didn't want to use digitalized sound like in the other projects, DF Player Mini with MP. I want instead to use some kind of mechanical sound. So I bought that motor we see in the back. It's a sharp DC motor. So whenever you turn this machine on, the motor starts to rotate and there's purr coming from the machine, an interesting purr. Then I've got an Arduino Uno from the robot also. And I started to code the software. Of course, at this point, the machine is doing exactly what the short story said, what Mario Lebrero said. But I wanted to add a little bit more to this machine. So I wanted the machine to think, between quotes, about Gladys, to think of Gladys. So I started to check the story a little bit more, and Mario Lebrero wrote not one short story, but two. They work in a negative positive game, and the same events from different point of views are narrated in one of the stories and the other story. So I took words related to those events from the positive side, I put them in an array. I took words from the other short story telling the same thing from different point of view, and I put them in another array. So when you turn on the machine, besides the poor sound from the motor, these words, the positive side words, started to flow through the machine the first 12 hours. And after that, the negative words from the other short story flow in the machine for the next 12 hours. And then the old procedure starts again. But I didn't want to stay there as well. I wanted to provide some of this thinking. And all I had, here we see in the machine, all I had was a button to turn on the machine, a LED to let you know that the machine is actually turned on. Besides, you can, of course, hear the sound of the motor, the purr. And I had left one LED. I started to think, how can I use that LED to display words, to encode words? And so Morse code was the answer, and it was really straightforward. After you turn on the machine, the other LED will start to blink, and those blinks are in Morse code. So if you install a Morse in a smartphone and you put the camera of the smartphone over the LED, you will get decoded every word that the machine to think of Gladys is actually thinking. I won't bother to talk about any purpose of this machine because it's absolutely exactly what I explained. It has no other purpose that exists than providing some kind of link between machine, art, and literature. These are just some examples that I wanted to get in deep, but I have a lot of other machines related to literature projects. In this case, we are seeing literature dispenser. This project started because in Argentina we have long waiting lines in banks and other places, and because of security or something, I don't know, they don't let you in the bank to use any electronic device. You cannot use a Kindle to read. You can't use your phone, your computer. So you are just sitting there waiting for long periods of time with a ticket in your hand with your number. And then I started to think, what can I print a short story in that ticket? Maybe instead of looking each other's faces, we will all be reading an interesting story. And not only that, I can also check how long it will be the waiting and provide a short story with a length related to that waiting time. So for this project, I did not use Arduino. I choose to use Raspberry Pi. So it has a Raspberry Pi. It has an LCD screen, some buttons. It has a thermal printer as well as a nictograph project. I always like to take this project with me when I go to fairs or exhibitions. It also has been in an exhibition, an art exhibition in Argentina. So it's really the interaction and the fact that you can take a ticket with you with a short story. And I also put there interesting short stories from contemporary Argentine writers. So it's always a pleasure to take this machine when I go and I travel. Another project that is related to literature, maybe, I don't know your ages, but you may remember Furby. Furby was a toy made in the late 90s, 1998, I think was the first version. It is really, from my point of view, and maybe if you're a coder or you have a background in electronic, you will feel the same. It's a piece of art. It's a small toy, but it has some way of artificial intelligence, and it learns some things, some language, and it uses just one motor for a lot of different movements. So I had a lot of respect for this device and didn't want to tear all the parts apart to make my project. I wanted to maintain as much as possible. So my approach to hack this furry was to just hijack the signal that is sent to the speaker. So in that sense, I can measure with an analog input in the Arduino that the signal is being sent to the speaker, hijack that signal, and instead provide another audio. So in this case, I'm using again robot, a DF Mini, and I put there in a micro SD card recordings from Jorge Luis Borges, which is, it doesn't need any introduction, an excellent writer, and a lot of wisdom quotes from Borges were loaded in the micro SD card. If you know this toy, you know that the interaction, sometimes it answers to your stimulus. You're talking, you put your hand over the eyes, and the toy starts talking, and other times he starts talking, nobody knows why. So it's really interesting to have this toy / piece of electronic art or whatever next to your desk and listen to Jorge Luis Borges quotes. So again, you can see this project and the other ones. I have videos online if you're interested in them. And this one is the smallest Kindle ever. I've got a tiny ink display, 2.9 inches, and I didn't know what to do with that screen. But then I thought, well, I can make my own Kindle. And since the screen is so small, I can use it for a small piece of literature. In this case, haikus. As you may remember, haikus is a Japanese form of poetry, really short. I've got an Arduino MKR0 with a micro SD card reader. And I put all the parts there, a switch to turn on, a battery, I designed the case, I put a button to go forward and back in the pages, and the haiku reader was there. So again, all the instructions and everything are online if you want to replicate the experience. Maybe you have a similar screen and you want to check how is the experience to make your own Kindle, which is in advance not so complicated. This project is using a Raspberry Pi. Maybe you know the guy there is Hunter Thompson, a great writer and journalist. He started a new way of making journalism, the Gonzo journalism. And I wanted to use to make some machines around his figure. So in this case, I used a Raspberry Pi with a standard LCD screen that I found, in fact, in the street. I did not purchase that screen, and I connected both. I connected an audio output from the Raspberry Pi to a speaker. And this project is an art installation. What it does is it starts to read fragments from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, one of the best novels from this writer. And every letter is typed on screen, and using the audio, you can hear typewriting sounds. And after the words fill the screen, that is converted in a piece of ASCII art. ASCII art is using pixels to create an image. Letters are used. So when you are far away from the screen, you can see, in this case, the face of Hunter Thompson. But when you come closer to the screen, you see letters. It's an interesting art installation. In that way, many things are happening at the same time. This machine, the name is Book Sound. I always, when I go to some kind of fair or reunion or panel with other writers. Writers always love to talk about the sound of the prose. How does it sound? And I started to think, well, what about the sound? What about it? I will talk about rhythm, what's in there. And I started to think if I could be able to make a machine that converts the writing to music. And I got a Raspberry Pi, I got a camera, a long ribbon that was hard to find here in Buenos Aires, a small OLED screen, a button, and some other parts. And this machine works in this way. When you press the button, a picture is taken from that page you put in there. The picture is converted using OCR, and words are obtained from the page. Then the machine makes some kind of analysis between how many points and commas you have, how long the words are, how long the paragraphs are. And with that information, that is mapped to a piece of electronic music. In this case, to simplify the program application, if you are a writer that uses short sentences, the piece will be faster. And if you're a writer that uses other kind of words and paragraphs, the piece will have other type of sound. That's the idea behind book sound, which is this project. I think this is the last one. I have other projects as well, but I didn't want to talk about all of them, but you're welcome to follow them, follow me in social media and view all the other projects. This is a Mindflex band. It's a toy by Mattel where you put a headband, and according to the cerebral activity, ECG waves, you are able to play a game with a small ball and air and pass the ball through obstacles. That's the game. I took the band from this game and I connected some cables and I made some electronics to read the same waves that are sent to the game. But in this case, I sent the information about ECG waves to an Arduino. And the idea here is that you achieve some states of concentration if you want to keep the poetry flowing in the screen. It's very interesting to do that, to know that you cannot use your fingers or your voice. You have to concentrate to keep reading the poetry. And the same system could be applied to many other things. Maybe you can switch the content according to the cerebral activity. So it's an interesting project. I publish all the plans and information, not so easy as other ones, but if you're interested in this type of strange machines, I think you could be interested in this project as well. So as you may imagine, I also make paid machines for a living, not only these projects. Right now, in fact, I'm doing a lot of machines using machine learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. And of course, this is very interesting, and I like so much to make those machines. But there's something special about literature machines. Maybe the joyful aspect pushes the boundaries a little more. Maybe it's a reminder that all your knowledge could and should be combined. Maybe machines without a purpose are eager to find one in a clear, open space. And they are also eager to find meaning. And that's interesting because this is related to the things I was talking before, that sometimes you finish a machine and you're not sure about the purpose. And always you find things that you would not think about it at first. And last but not least, maybe this is all an excuse to tell an interesting story that links you with other people with similar interests. And that's, of course, a lot. So I've reached the end of this talk. I would like to thank Maker Faire. I'm sorry again, I don't speak Italian. I will learn Italian soon because I love Italy. I love going there. If you want to reach me on social media, there you have Ronnie Mandini everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but anyway, I have an account there. So I would like to hear your impressions and your comments, so you're welcome to contact me. Thank you very much.